Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video and myself, Jonathan MSPs. Ukraine War News Update, third part thereof, for the 30th of August 2024. This is a military aid and a second geopolitical update for today. I did one in the early hours of this morning scheduled from yesterday. I have been a little bit delayed today. The mapping update is phenomenal. There are so many changes to the map, so I will do a frontline update probably after I return from seeing Aliens in the cinema. And yeah, so that is, I still haven't finished doing the update. It is behemoth. The number of pins and the number of changes to the map is quite extraordinary. We'll go to the military aid and assistance section. The EU will press ahead and deliver $50 billion to Ukraine from frozen Russian assets, even though the US is trying to stall. Quote, "We will do whatever we can to support Ukraine regardless of decisions in Washington," says Joseph Borrell in the EU. Bloomberg reports EU to move forward with Russian asset plan regardless of the US. The US has sought EU assurances on G7 frozen assets funding plan. So it looks like the EU is forging ahead quite strongly there, which is great news. And if Ukraine can get hold of that money, there'll obviously be the desire to put that towards a lot of military goods. But there's also, I don't know whether it is going to be ring fenced for military products or whether there is an allowance to, for example, close the gap with their budget going forward, which has a huge shortfall. And of course, you know, you can't fight a war if you don't have a functioning government and therefore country. So, you know, it's not just about weapons; it's about weapons and a state. So we'll have to see where that goes. But yes, certainly a lot of things there's a big old shopping list I'm sure we could all imagine putting together. Right, Italy has maintained its position on the weapons given to Ukraine, a position that prevents Kiev from using the weapons on Russian territory. "We are not at war with Moscow," is the approach. "We have sent many defensive weapons and now about to send a new SAMP-T battery." Actually, War Translated says, gives this excerpt from what they've said. "Each country makes its own decisions. We have mostly sent defensive weapons and now we are going to send a new SAMP-T battery, which is defensive and cannot be used on Russian territory. We reiterate that we are not at war with Russia. NATO is not at war with Russia, so Italy remains firm on the position that our weapons should be used on Ukrainian territory. Other countries will decide as they see fit." I don't know whether that calls into question the use of any other weapons, such as the Storm Shadow Scalp G that is used by the Italians, the French, and the British, and whether, you know, there's obviously continuing to be this argument about whether the US is able to put a kibosh on any usage of Western weapons. Indeed, the Daily Telegraph has written another article whereby they say Ukraine has called on UK not to waste the momentum created by the Kursk operation and to allow Storm Shadow strikes on Russian territory, but also talking about how I think the title to the Telegraph article is something like Starmer is being undermined. I think there's this realization now that the will of the government is that Ukraine can use this stuff abroad, and that it's kind of out of the UK's hands, really, in terms of whether they can. I mean, Ukraine can use Hobson's choice, right? They can use the Storm Shadow the way I understand it. It's not like forbidden by the US for some exports sanctions in place or whatever it may be, some kind of regulation like that. I think it's just plain old blackmail. Like, if you use that, we aren't going to give you any more assistance type thing. Now, following the UK's footsteps, the Dutch have tactfully implied that it is, they've implied the US by omission, saying the catastrophe being created by limiting Ukraine's ability to strike Russia isn't the Dutch, but the Americans limiting rockets on the F-16s. So, Commander of the Armed Forces of the Netherlands, Eichelheim, said that Ukraine can use Dutch F-16 fighter jets for military purposes on the territory of Russia. In an interview with NOS, he called he also called the Ukrainian operation in the Kursk region of the Russian Federation brilliant on a practical level. So I guess if F-16s aren't used, it's going to be an American thing. But then again, I don't know that the F-16s will be reasonably used in incursions into Russia, too close to air defense systems. You would want to keep them back. I was going to say it's safer to use them in the air defense mode, shooting down missiles and drones within Ukrainian territory. But of course, we know that on Monday an F-16 was lost. So, hey, there you go. But yeah, there's still all this rumbling conversation about whether Ukraine whether Ukraine will be able to use Western weapons inside Russia, and why they are not able to. Right, Kyiv Independent reports that Ukraine is receiving the shells from the Prague-led initiative on schedule. At least that's what the Czech foreign minister has claimed, and that's a big claim. The Prague-led ammunition initiative is delivering supplies to Ukraine on schedule. Good news there. At the same time, the Scranton Army ammunition plant, as I talked about yesterday, has ramped up its manufacturing of artillery ammunition along with two nearby facilities. They've managed to boost recent artillery shell production by 50%, now churning out over 36,000 artillery shells per month. In addition, an additional 3 production lines are under construction at the Scranton plant. Now, 36,000 a month. If that's just from those plants, and are there other plants in the US that add to that? I don't know. I don't know about the wording of this, but certainly they were wanting to move. They had moved from 14,000, which is per month, which is what the US originally were doing, to 28,000, and then they were over that, and now it looks like 36,000. But that might be not all. It could well be that other production facilities are meaning that the output is larger than that. They are, I think, aiming for 85,000, is it, eventually in 2025. Right now, we're concentrating on 155mm shells. That's pretty much all we're concentrating on, they say. So that's good going from the US there. Now, Joseph Borrell from the EU has said that the EU has already transferred 700,000 shells to Ukraine out of the promised 1 million. Of course, that wasn't quite on time. They overpromised and were unable to deliver due to how long it takes, basically, to ramp up production schedules and ramp up capacity. It is a lot more difficult unless you go full on war economy. A lot more difficult than you might imagine. Thank you, of course, but 1.5 years has already passed since the announcement of the million shells, says Max24, would be handed over to Ukraine. I personally think they should have just said, we're going to give Ukraine a whole bunch of shells and not put a number on it. They've kind of been hoisted by their own petard. You start putting an explicit number on things and then people start holding you to account. And when there are so many unknowns, it's a dangerous thing to do. EU is set to reach 60,000 trained Ukrainian soldiers by tomorrow, with Germany alone planning to train 10,000 by the end of the year, according to German Defense Minister or official Thomas Hitzler. And that's, of course, I presume not including the UK Interflex Operation Interflex, that is training a vast number of Ukrainian, not just soldiers, actually Marines and others, special forces in the UK with the help of other nations as well. So I presume that number is far higher when you take into account other non-EU nations. Well, the UK. US military has placed a $1.3 billion order for Javelin missiles, the anti-tank guided missile, with over 4,000 of them going to Ukraine. Lockheed Martin and Raytheon's joint venture secured a $1.3 billion contract to produce those missiles, with plans to increase annual production to 3,960 units by 2026. Ukrainian special forces have demonstrated 3 surface robot systems being tested: the Termite, the Shabliar, and the Lyut 2.0. Termite is used for transport and evacuation. Remote turret Shabliar fires a machine gun without recoil, and Lyut can be used for ambushes in combination with other robots. So let's have a look. Well, actually, let's not have too much of a look because this is a 9-minute video, but it's interesting to see the development of these UGVs. I think Russia's been, we talked about this a little bit in the live the other day with the man with Daniela from Tochny, and I think the Russians have been possibly trying to get ahead in using, certainly in combat scenarios, UGVs, unmanned ground vehicles, more so than the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have been using them further back in sort of supply and with regard to evacuating injured and whatnot, but they appear to be developing these ones we've seen a number with turrets on board. A recoilless turret would be super useful. And yeah, here we see the special forces showcasing a number of different options for their... sorry about that. A bit of a random voice distorted Ukrainian for you. So anyway, you can go and check 9 minutes of this guy talking up UGVs, but they're certainly going to feature more and more prominently in this war as it goes on. Right, Lukashenko, the dictator from Belarus, has said he will not send troops to Ukraine. Quote, there were no orders to go to war outside Belarus, and there won't be any. We will only go to war when they come to us with bad intentions, said the dictator, commenting on a crisis at the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. So there are these claims that the Belarusians are building up troops at the border. Earlier, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine said that Lukashists had pulled troops and mercenaries of Wagner PMC to the border with Ukraine. I presume that just means Lukashenko. The dictator was urged not to make tragic mistakes for his own country under pressure from Moscow, and to withdraw troops from the border at a distance exceeding the range of the existing fire systems in Belarus. So a bit of a bubbling issue there between the two nations. And North Korea has said to have sent 13,000 military cargo units to Russia. So those big cargo, those storage units, cargo units. I forget the word. Anyway, containers. That's the word. Storage containers. According to South Korean media, they have said that possibly 6 million artillery shells have been sent from North Korea to South Korea, and leaves us wondering, yeah, but what happens about that? What does the United Nations say about that? Anyway, moving on to, although this is very much connected to military aid, this is a good segue. German aid to Ukraine reports, as many are at the moment, according to information from German media, actually, and here General Anzeiger, an explosion occurred this morning at Dynitech in Troisdorf, injuring several people. The company belongs to Diehl Defense and is one of the most important suppliers of explosives for Diehl Defense, Rheinmetall and other companies. There is currently no further information on that. I will keep an eye on the situation. Already in May 2024, there's a massive fire at a civilian site of Diehl Group in Berlin, which caused immense damage. Several media outlets unanimously reported that Russian sabotage, contrary to official statements, was responsible for the fire. Further details are now public. 2 people were seriously injured in the incident. Following the local fire brigade, the building was according to the local fire brigade, the building was severely affected by the incident, which is why there are no more emergency services in the building. The fire brigade has also disconnected the power supply. It looks more like a more powerful explosion or bigger incident. Still no information about what caused the explosion. Further updates to follow. And then a little update. According to initial information, investigators believe that the explosion was caused by an accident. But we will see, because there's still some unknowns about what happened with regard to the previous one at Diehl Defense. And there have been these other explosions. There's one in Wales at BAE Systems, one in, was it Scranton, Pennsylvania, in the ammunition factory there, or somewhere else in the state. So there are these rumours about potential sabotage events. It's not beyond the realm of, plausibility, really, that it might have been so. Anyway, continuing, the President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Keir Starmer yesterday agreed to go on supporting Ukraine, reiterating a call for immediate ceasefire in the Middle East and reaffirming a desire to deepen bilateral relations, in particular in the fields of defence, security and energy. I think Keir Starmer and our present government are being quite clever about what they're doing at the moment, which is realising that the UK needs to get closer to Europe, but without wanting to deal explicitly with the hot potato of rejoining the EU, because that would cause an absolute nightmare, even though polls suggest that now well over 50% support rejoining, or that leaving the EU was a bad decision. So actually that popularity of leaving the EU has kind of plummeted in relative terms. Nonetheless, I'm trying to be kind of non-partisan about this, just like giving you the data, but it's really important that we do remain very close to major European powers and EU. So at a very volatile time geopolitically, security is super important, and working with others on security and being able to specialize but work in a team is kind of much more useful than doing everything on your own, and especially when intelligence sharing is vital. So, Germany and France are super important players, and it's no coincidence that Keir Starmer met with Olaf Scholz the day before and Emmanuel Macron the day after, and has cemented closer relationships, which will help with things like immigration as well. If you're worried about things like that, then this is good news. Without saying, right, we're joining the EU and we're not giving up our sovereignty. It's just we're going to work closer and we're trying, just work to the advantage of all involved. These are such dangerous times at the moment. I think this is really good news. Anyway, Hungarian Foreign Minister Szijjártó has arrived in St. Petersburg, Hungary, dancing a merry jig with the Kremlin, and it is, I think, fairly distasteful. The official reported about it on his social networks. According to Russian media, the minister arrived in Russia to discuss energy security issues. Now, of course, there are the issues with Ukraine having turned off the gas pipeline to Hungary and Slovakia, although there are claims that they are still getting what they need from Russia in terms of hydrocarbons. So it could be that there are alternative routes that they are now committed to. There is actually something further. I thought there was something further to say on that. Perhaps not. Oh yes, here it is. So from January the 1st, 2025, the Druzhba oil pipeline, through which Slovakia and the Czech Republic and Hungary receive Russian oil in particular, will cease to operate, says Podolyak. So the Ukrainians are pretty adamant that there's going to be no change there, and it's going to be closed down. So yeah, no wonder the Hungarian foreign minister has found himself in Moscow. Okay, Putin is to visit the ICC member Mongolia next week. So Mongolia, the country, obviously. ICC meaning the International Criminal Court. And you have the Rome Statute, which is what ICC kind of member states sign up to if they want to agree to legislation on war crime, etc., etc. And so if an arrest warrant goes out for anyone and that person goes to an ICC or Rome Statute signatory state, then they are obligated to arrest that person. So Mongolia is a member of the ICC, and the visit will mark Putin's first trip to an ICC member country that has ratified the Rome Statute. The agreement calls on member nations to arrest Putin if he enters their territory. Now, Bloomberg reports that Putin has defied the ICC warrant in planning to go to Mongolia. He's received assurances before his visit to Mongolia that he would not be arrested under an International Criminal Court warrant, two people familiar with the Kremlin's preparations said. The September the 3rd visit will be Putin's first one to an ICC member country since the warrant was issued last March. As a signatory to the Rome Statute, Mongolia is obliged to execute the warrant and arrest Putin if he appears on its territory. Quote, "There are no worries," Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said. Putin is travelling to Mongolia under Chinese security guarantees. Mongolia will not go against China, although it does not want to quarrel with the United States, says Stanislav Belkovsky, a former Kremlin political advisor. Still, Putin has never yet risked such a visit. The trip comes just 6 months after the Mongolian judge serving the ICC took office. Remember, he didn't go to, was it the BRICS meetings? Was it in South Africa? He didn't go there in the end, and South Africa were kind of umming and ahhing what to do about that, and luckily they didn't have to make that decision. Kremlin's not concerned about the possibility of Putin's arrest under the ICC warrant, says no reports during his upcoming visit. His press secretary Peskov stated that Russia has excellent relations with Mongolia and that the issue has been specifically addressed. Putin's visit will be his first since, as mentioned, the first to an ICC country since his arrest warrant was formalized. Now, Ukraine has sent a formal request to Mongolia to arrest Putin when he visits there soon, says Tim White. Mongolia is a signatory to the Rome Statute, so it should arrest such war criminals. And here is Ukraine's official formal request to Mongolia. We'll see what happens. My guess is square root of naffle. Right, North Korea has shipped 13,000 containers with arms to Russia, so we've heard. Now, Jake Sullivan, the anti-escalation guru, if you like, from the Biden administration, is in China right now. Although, as this person says, continuing to be completely ineffective. Appeasement and pretending bad things are happening aren't policy, they're just weakness. Ouch. So Xi Jinping holds surprise meeting with senior Biden aide in Beijing. Chinese leader speaks with Jake Sullivan, who was making his first visit to Beijing as National Security Advisor. Wonder what that will be about. Now, Chinese banks, on the other hand, are stopping transactions with Russia en masse, according to Reuters. They've begun blocking transactions for electronics out of fear of secondary sanctions. It seems to be gathering pace. That's really good news. And I think the US Treasury Department is kind of a bit of an unsung hero in the kind of in the work they're doing and pressure they are applying to these third-party countries and entities, financial institutions. So good stuff there. Now, finally, for this video, Ivana Stradner, who's a Balkans expert, says, well, okay, what's happened? Let's rewind. There has been, how much is it? Not 3 billion, is it 3? No. A lot of money Serbia are going to spend on 12 Dassault Rafale fighter jets from France. And I've talked about this before. Like when you have these peripheral countries like Hungary and Serbia who you feel and fear you are losing influence with, and they're going further and further away from the EU towards Russia, you have the carrot or stick approach. If you push them away and if you beat them for doing that, then you end up making them expedite their move away from the EU towards Russia. So you really need to attract them in rather than to try and punish them to stay in. The problem is with something like this, I think there have been some analyses talking about the risks involved here. But if you're using economic bribery to do that, then that's fine. But if you're using some kind of military economic bribery, then there could be some problems here, because I would imagine Serbia and Hungary and Slovakia are rather like sieves, rather like colanders, very, very holy with their intelligence preservation. And if you're giving them some delicate, sophisticated military property, then I imagine that the information on that property goes straight to Russia. So giving them these Rafale fighters is essentially handing over the secrets of the Rafale fighter and how it works and how therefore to destroy it straight to the Russians. This is quite a risky thing to do. Ivana Stradner, so AP, Associated Press, announces Serbia announces $3 billion deal to buy 20. I should read the stuff in front of me when I try and go, oh, what is it? Was it 3 billion? I think it's right in front of my face. $3 billion deal to buy 12 French warplanes in a shift away from Russia. And Ivana Stradner says, no, it's not a shift away from Russia. This is Vučić, the Serbian president's strategy to buy Paris so he can stay in power for as long as possible. That's exactly what Putin has been doing for 2 decades. Angela Merkel and Macron are responsible for why the Western Balkans is in a mess. So this is the kind of idea that Vučić is playing both sides, speaking out both sides of his mouth, straddling the fence, all those kind of metaphors. He is trying to appease Russia while trying to appease the EU, but really, I think we are allowing places like Serbia to get away with far too much, is my general opinion. But let me know what you think. Anyway, that's enough from me on those topics. Hopefully that was of interest to you. It's worth noting that from a war point of view in Ukraine, there's breaking news that a building has been hit with a guided glide bombing in Kharkiv, just a complete kind of another war criminal-esque event where people have died, including children, as a residential building has been absolutely hammered. The scenes are horrific. And what will be the answer from the international community? Well, such as it is, I guess that these sorts of events are completely normalized, sadly enough. But we should be standing up in solidarity with Ukraine, horrified by the terrible things that Russia continually does, and then give Ukraine everything they need. But we don't seem to be giving them everything they need. We seem to be giving them dribs and drabs. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. Speak soon.